I arrived at Camp Pine hoping for a carefree summer, not the harrowing nights that now stain my memory. The moment I stepped off the old bus, I felt an unsettling hush lingering beneath the laughter of excited campers. Our cabins were nestled around a lake whose waters sparkled by day, but seemed ominously black at night. I shared cabin B with Lucy, an adventurous spirit, and Kevin, whose humor often kept us sane when fear crept in. On our first evening, Mr. Hartford, the head counselor, led us in a round of ghost stories by the campfire. I remember thinking they were silly attempts to spook us until I woke around midnight to the sound of soft crying just outside our window. Initially, I assumed it might be a homesick camper, but the sobs faded into a whisper of wind. The eerie quiet made my skin crawl. The next day passed in a blur of canoe races and makeshift obstacle courses. Lucy teased me for jumping at every creaking branch, while Kevin made light of our nighttime scare, calling it my overactive imagination. Still, I couldn't shake the sensation that someone or something was watching me from the edge of the forest. Each time I glanced back, I saw only swaying pine trees. Night fell again, and after lights out, I heard it once more, a faint weeping drifting from the lake shore. Heart pounding, I slipped out of bed. Lucy and Kevin followed, curiosity and worry etched on their faces. We crept through the moonlit clearing toward the water, where we found nothing but silent reeds and the gentle lapping of waves. Then, without warning, an icy breeze caressed my neck. A shape materialized at the shoreline, a pale figure, translucent, in the moonlight, clad in dripping clothes. I stifled a scream. Lucy grabbed my arm, eyes wide. Kevin whispered, "Do you see that?" We all did. The figure let out a wail that echoed across the lake. Before we could blink, it vanished into the night, leaving ripples behind. We raced back to our cabin, adrenaline surging through our veins. The counselors tried to calm us in the morning, attributing our sighting to a vivid dream or prank. But Mr. Hartford's forced smile told me he suspected more. Later, I overheard him discussing a tragedy from years past, a camper who drowned under mysterious circumstances. Some claimed her spirit never left the lake. That afternoon, Lucy decided we should gather evidence. We staked out the lakeshore with flashlights after curfew, each step crackling on the gravel. An hour passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl. Suddenly, Kevin gasped. From the corner of my eye, I caught sight of the same apparition gliding toward us. She stretched out a trembling arm, mouth opening in a soundless plea. My blood ran cold as the figure reached the shallow water, eyes brimming with sorrow. A faint voice murmured, "Help me," before fading into mist. Lucy's bravado shattered. She broke into sobs. Kevin crouched by the shore, as though transfixed by what we had witnessed. I felt a crushing sadness, a deep sense of loss. The following night, storms pummeled the camp. Lightning flashed, illuminating the lake in stark white bursts. Through my window, I saw her silhouette, drifting amid the storm's fury. Sleep was impossible. The next day, the counselors announced we'd end the session early, citing severe weather. In hushed tones, we acknowledged it was more than just the rain. As we prepared to leave, I felt compelled to approach the lake one last time. Lucy and Kevin stood by my side. We saw no ghostly figure, only churning, rain-soaked waters. Yet the air felt charged with lingering sorrow, as though the spirit still sought release. I offered a silent prayer for peace. When the bus finally pulled away, I glanced back at the rustling pines and the haunted shoreline. Camp Pine would forever be stained by that mournful presence. Some nights, I dream of her pale hand reaching out for mine, pleading for help I cannot give. The memory remains, an echo of grief that still resonates whenever I hear the sound of waves. Though I've told myself it was just a ghost story come to life. Deep down I know we saw something real. The chill in the air, the trembling voice, all lingers, reminding me that sometimes the dead cannot find rest, even beneath the darkest waters. I remember arriving at Camp Redwood with uneasy anticipation, my parents' car kicking up dust as it drove away. The towering pines seemed ancient, their needles whispering secrets. I was assigned to Cabin C with Blake and Fiona, both friendly enough to calm my nerves. Still, I sensed something was off, as though the forest carried a silent warning. On our first night, we sat around a crackling campfire, while Ms. Winchester, our lead counselor, recounted local legends, phantom lights, and eerie howls. Most campers snickered, but I felt a chill trickle down my spine. Later, in the darkness of Cabin C, I heard a noise, something between a growl and a hiss outside our thin walls. My heart pounded, but exhaustion finally pulled me under. The next day passed with archery, canoeing, and bug spray galore. Yet whenever I neared the tree line, I felt watched. Fiona admitted she'd heard the nighttime sound too. Blake brushed it off as an overactive imagination. Still, curiosity gnawed at me. After lights out, we crept along a moonlit trail behind the cabins. Fog curled around our ankles. Suddenly, a large shape darted across the path, too fast to see clearly, but unmistakably massive. We froze, flashlights trembling. I caught a single gleaming eye before it vanished. Back in our bunks, sleep evaded us. The next morning, Ms. Winchester led a brief search. We found enormous footprints and claw marks on a tree, though she tried to stay calm, her eyes betrayed her concern. That night, the camp sank into a tense quiet. Even the crickets seemed hesitant to chirp. I lay awake, bracing for something terrible. It came around midnight, a blood-curdling cry from near the lake. We rushed outside to find a younger camper shaking like a leaf. He insisted he saw a hulking creature stalking him. As we tried to calm him, a low snarl ripped through the darkness. My blood ran cold. A tall shadow lurked at the edge of the pines, then slipped away into the mist. Morning brought frenzy. Some campers demanded to leave, others blamed a rabid bear. The counselors announced we'd be going home early. While we packed, rumors flew. A cursed spirit, a monstrous cryptid, or something worse. Blake's face was pale, his disbelief gone, as the bus rumbled away. I stared at the forest. Even now, I recall that dreadful presence, watching from behind the trees, waiting. Camp Redwood taught me that nightmares thrive in the places we consider safe. Sometimes, they watch us with hungry, glowing eyes, and their memory lingers long after we flee. I still can't shake the memory of that single eye, gleaming in the beam of my flashlight, reflecting an intelligence both predatory and disturbingly aware. It moved with a fluid grace no normal animal could possess. At night, I'd hear it breathing, or perhaps that was my own terror echoing inside my head. Fiona told me her grandmother believed in forest spirits, creatures that roam hidden corners of the world. She swore they only appear when humans trespass too far into their domain. I tried to laugh it off, but the claw marks were too high, the prints too wide to be a mere bear. One afternoon, I found Blake standing by the lake, staring at the water. He'd gone for a midnight stroll earlier that week and spotted something taller than any person. He heard heavy breathing and felt an oppressive weight on his chest, as if fear itself had taken form. He hadn't told us, because he didn't want to spread panic. The counselors tried to maintain order, but every snap of a twig sent a wave of anxiety through the camp. By the time the session ended, none of us wanted to stay. Leaving felt like escaping a nightmare that might erupt at any second. Even in my dreams, that presence haunted me. I couldn't banish the image of that towering silhouette from my mind. Sometimes, I wonder if it still prowls those woods, waiting for another soul to stray. Even the memory chills my spine. Some secrets I've learned should remain hidden. I won't forget. I signed up for Camp Crestmore, expecting a break from city life. The camp brochure boasted of towering cliffs, lush trails, and nightly bonfires. It seemed perfect until I noticed a heavy crate being unloaded from the supply van. One of the staff, a jittery young man named Derek, guarded it anxiously. Something about that box set me on edge. I told myself I was just being paranoid. My cabin mates, Lindsay and Oliver, teased me about my curious nature. On the second day, I saw Derek hurrying into an old storage shed carrying a worn leather book. I followed at a distance, slipping behind a stack of crates as he pried the crate open. Nestled in straw was an ornate wooden idol, its surface etched with sinister symbols. Derek whispered frantically, "Not here. It's too dangerous." I felt an inexplicable urge to see more. That night, while everyone else sang songs by the fire, I snuck back to the shed. My flashlight flickered on rotted boards and cluttered shelves before revealing the idol's grotesque face. Its hollow eyes seemed to peer straight into me. My heart thumped wildly as I lifted it from the crate, ignoring the voice in my head, screaming that I should leave it alone. A rush of cold air wrapped around me. Footsteps scraped behind me, and I nearly dropped the idol. Derek stood there, panic etched across his features. "Put it back," he hissed. He snatched it away and warned me never to touch it again. In the dim glow of the flashlight, I saw genuine terror in his eyes. From that moment on, eerie occurrences plagued Camp Crestmore. Doors slammed shut without a breeze. Weird scratching sounds echoed through the dining hall at night. Oliver woke up with strange bruises on his arms, shaped almost like claw marks. Lindsay claimed she heard whispering whenever she passed the storage shed. Determined to understand, I confronted Derek one afternoon by the lake. At first, he refused to talk, but my relentless questions finally broke his resolve. He explained that the idol was discovered during a dig in a remote region, rumored to be cursed by vengeful spirits. Its keepers were told to seal it away, never to let it see the moonlight. Camp Crestmore's owners had agreed to store it temporarily, thinking it was just a trinket. That night, the wind howled as storm clouds blotted out the stars. I was jolted awake by shouts. Grabbing my flashlight, I raced outside to find a group of campers near the bonfire pit, staring at a figure in the shadows. It looked human, but its movements were unnaturally stiff. In its outstretched hand, it clutched the idol. Lightning flashed, revealing a twisted expression on what might have been Derek's face or something controlling him. A jolt of raw fear coursed through me as I realized he was muttering in a language I didn't recognize. The bonfire flames roared higher, as if feeding off his frenzied words. Smoke stung my eyes, but I couldn't look away. Lindsay screamed, and Oliver tugged at my sleeve, urging me to run. I couldn't move, transfixed by the ritual unfolding before us. Suddenly, a gust of wind extinguished the flames, plunging everything into darkness. By the time my eyes adjusted, Derek was gone, leaving the idol propped against a log. We rushed forward, dousing it with water, half hoping to break whatever power it held. Thunder rumbled overhead, shaking the ground. The next day, the counselors announced the camp would close early, citing maintenance issues. Most campers seemed relieved, eager to escape the creeping dread. We later learned Derek was found, wandering in the woods, dazed and incoherent, with no memory of what he'd done, or so they said. Before I boarded the bus, I sneaked back to the storage shed one last time. The crate was empty. The idol had vanished. I felt a mixture of relief and terror, unsure if it was truly gone, or if it had simply found another hiding place. As the bus rumbled away from Camp Crestmore, I shivered at the thought of what might still be lurking in those shadowy pine groves. Even now, I hear echoes of Derek's chanting in my mind. I wonder if the idol's curse remains unbroken, drifting like a malignant cloud, waiting for another unsuspecting soul to stumble across its ancient power. The memory clings to me, a grim reminder that some artifacts carry secrets best left buried. I never believed in supernatural forces until my weeks at Camp Whispering Elms. I had expected the usual camp routine: songs, hikes, and lazy afternoons by the lake. Instead, we became victims of an invisible threat that spread like a slow poison. I remember the day I arrived. The mossy cabins, the towering elms swaying in the breeze. The air felt unusually thick, heavy with foreboding. My cabin mates, Darren and Melissa, noticed the tension too. On the second morning, we found one of the counselors, Ms. Connolly, pale and listless. She claimed she felt dizzy, but the nurses' station was overwhelmed with other campers experiencing the same symptoms. Strange rashes appeared on arms and necks, accompanied by fevers and nightmares that left everyone drained. We tried to continue camp activities, but the laughter was forced. Hushed conversations revolved around who had fallen ill next. Some whispered of a contagion drifting in the elm trees. Others spoke of a cursed spring somewhere deep in the forest. I tried to stay rational, telling myself it was just an outbreak, a flu. Yet every night brought fresh screams echoing through the cabins, and I'd wake drenched in sweat from nightmares of twisted silhouettes in the moonlight. One afternoon, Darren went missing for hours. When he finally returned, his eyes were bloodshot, and he could barely stand. He muttered incoherently about hearing voices calling him to the heart of the woods. Melissa and I helped him to the nurse, but the staff looked overwhelmed and frightened. Day by day, more campers exhibited odd behavior, wandering aimlessly, muttering strange phrases, collapsing in the dining hall. Determined to find answers, Melissa and I ventured into the forest. A rumor suggested there was an old well that once supplied the camp, abandoned after several unexplained incidents. Following a faint trail of footprints, we spotted a stone structure choked with ivy. The well's opening gaped like a maw. As we approached, an overpowering stench hit us, and we gagged. Strange markings adorned the stones, as though someone had carved symbols into the moss. Melissa shone her flashlight into the darkness, revealing shallow water at the bottom. Something about that water seemed disturbingly wrong, tinted a sickly green. A faint whisper echoed from the well's depths, too low to understand. A sudden gust of wind swept through the trees, carrying what sounded like a moan. We backed away, hearts racing. That night, the sickness spread faster. Campers tossed and turned, plagued by fevers and delirium. Even the counselors seemed helpless. Darren, now gravely ill, reached for my hand and rasped something, calling from below, before drifting into a trembling sleep. The words chilled me to my core. In desperation, Melissa and I confronted Mr. Landon, the camp director. He admitted that an eerie legend surrounded the old well, claiming its water was tainted by a restless entity. Generations ago, a caretaker fell in and was never recovered. Locals believed his tormented spirit poisoned the water and anyone who lingered too long near it. As the situation worsened, Mr. Landon finally decided to shut down the camp. We had to evacuate, yet many campers were too weak to travel. That final night, lightning lit the sky, revealing skeletal branches thrashing in the wind. I couldn't sleep, haunted by the knowledge that a malevolent presence was suffocating this place. Early the next morning, ambulances arrived to transport the most serious cases. I boarded a bus, numb with dread. Through the window, I watched the ancient elms sway, their leaves rustling like distant whispers. I couldn't shake the sense that whatever lurked in that well would continue to fester, reaching out with ghostly fingers to claim any who ventured near. Weeks later, I learned some campers recovered fully, while others suffered lingering nightmares. Darren eventually regained his health but refused to speak of camp whispering elms. As for me, I still hear echoes of that insidious voice whenever I close my eyes. The memory is a grim reminder that some evils cannot be contained by locked gates or forest walls. They seep into your mind, haunting you long after you escape their source. I try to move on, yet the image of that moss-eaten well returns each night. I see a pale hand rising from the murky water, beckoning me to come closer. In my dreams, I stand transfixed, powerless to look away. Perhaps that's the final curse of Camp Whispering Elms, a quiet, lingering terror that clings to your soul and refuses to let go. If I hadn't witnessed it with my own eyes, I'd never believe that a single, seemingly ordinary counselor could hold such dreadful power. But at Camp Silver Valley, I learned that darkness can wear any face. It all began on a sweltering afternoon, when we arrived, eager for canoe trips and campfire songs. The first person who greeted me was Harper, a charismatic counselor with a bright laugh and an easy smile. My cabin mates Tristan and Rob thought Harper was the coolest. She cracked jokes, led thrilling hikes, and seemed to know every star in the night sky. Yet something about her eyes unsettled me. At times, they looked almost glazed, as though she were a puppet forced to grin. Late one evening, I overheard a hushed argument between Harper and the camp director, Ms. Bradley. Harper's voice sounded sharp, almost angry. Before it dropped to a low murmur, I couldn't make out. Over the next few nights, bizarre incidents rattled Camp Silver Valley. The bonfire logs were found hacked into strange shapes. Our cabin doors swung open without a breeze. I awoke once to see Harper standing outside, staring at nothing, arms limped by her sides. She turned slowly, eyes reflecting the moonlight like dull mirrors. In a raspy voice, she whispered, "Go back to sleep." The following morning, Tristan claimed to have seen Harper wandering near the old chapel ruins at the edge of camp. Rumor had it the chapel was built on cursed ground, abandoned after a series of unexplained accidents. Rob and I decided to investigate, convinced it was all just exaggerated gossip. We followed a narrow trail, brambles scratching our legs, until we spotted the crumbling stone walls. To our shock, Harper was inside, standing in the middle of the debris, her arms raised as if in prayer. A faint chanting drifted through the shattered windows. Her eyes snapped open, and we ducked behind a fallen beam. She strode out of the chapel with an eerie grace, heading deeper into the forest. Once she was gone, we crept inside. In the dust, we found intricate symbols drawn in a circle. At the center lay a small leather-bound journal stuffed with odd sketches. The writing was illegible, but one phrase stood out, "Bound to the darkness." That night, Ms. Bradley approached me, concern etched on her face. She asked if I'd seen Harper acting strangely. Reluctantly, I described the chanting and the journal. Ms. Bradley's expression darkened. She explained that Harper had been found wandering in the forest a week before camp started, disoriented and clutching an ancient pendant. Ever since, her behavior had fluctuated wildly. During the next campfire gathering, Harper insisted on telling a story. Her words flowed in an odd cadence, describing a time-worn entity that seeks human vessels to carry out its will. I felt goosebumps rise on my arms. As she finished, the campfire flared unnaturally high, sending sparks into the air. A hush fell over the group. Later that night, screams erupted from the girls' cabins. Rob, Tristan, and I sprinted over to find doors scratched with strange symbols. Inside, campers cowered as the lights flickered. Footsteps thudded on the roof, accompanied by muffled laughter. We burst outside just in time to see Harper leaping down, eyes glowing with an unholy gleam. She bolted into the woods. Ms. Bradley called an emergency meeting, telling us all to gather in the mess hall until sunrise. Half the counselors combed the forest, searching for Harper, but by dawn, there was no sign of her. Exhausted and terrified, we agreed to cut the session short. Everyone packed with trembling hands. The next day, Harper stumbled back into camp, disheveled, her voice gravelly and words disjointed. She claimed to remember nothing. I watched from a safe distance as Ms. Bradley and two others guided her into a van. Nobody tried to stop them. We were just relieved to be leaving that place. On the bus ride home, I replayed the images. Harper's moonlit eyes, The chanting in the ruined chapel, the unnatural flame towering above us. Even the air around her had felt charged, as though alive with some ancient, malevolent presence. To this day, I wonder if Harper truly was possessed by a force lurking in those woods, or if she unlocked something dark within herself. The memory of her lifeless gaze still haunts my dreams, reminding me that evil doesn't always wear a monstrous face. It can smile, laugh, and even guide you through the forest before unveiling the horror beneath. No matter how many times I try to rationalize, I can't erase that final image. Harper standing atop the cabin roof, moonlight burning in her eyes, arms spread wide like a dark omen. If I learned anything at Camp Silver Valley, it's that the worst monsters might be the ones wearing our own skin.